My ex-husband passed away and left me everything. Now his girlfriend is contesting his will. I could swear that I was married to the most handsome, intelligent and caring husband ever. His name is Andy. We met during the days I worked at a coffee shop. Everything moved pretty fast between the both of us. It felt like we were going to be together for better or worse, come rain or sunshine. But life does not always go according to plan, now does it? This is going to be a long story about the complications I faced in my first marriage to Andy. As I mentioned earlier, Andy and I met while I worked at a coffee shop. At the time, I worked there because I wanted a break from my professional field. I was feeling so overwhelmed working for a cantankerous boss, so I decided to try something out of my line. My parents didn't support it initially because of their status in their field, but eventually they came to terms with it and told me to do whatever I needed to keep my mental health. I come from a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 siblings. My parents both worked as bankers, although in different banks, and things were going fine for us. My mom was the head of her department, and this meant that she got a higher pay than the rest of the other employees. Mom and Dad had even met while seeking employment in the same banking firm. Fortunately, Mom got in, but Dad was rejected. Mom told me that the occasion of job seeking was what connected them. It first of all began as a sincere wish to know what was going on with Dad since he didn't get the job. Mom told us that for some reason she didn't understand. Then she was always worried for him. Each day she would send him openings she found. She didn't stop until he landed his first job. Then they had gone on their first date to celebrate the occasion. And it was there that Dad informed her that he had something for her since the first time he saw her. Sometimes I envied my parents' relationship. They taught me that true love did exist and what it meant to be loved. My parents didn't take us for granted. I could tell my mom about anything troubling me and not be afraid that she would scold me or something of that sort. Mom was the first best friend I had, and Dad was the first man I ever admired. I watched him when he spoke to Mom, how he looked into her eyes with so much love. I had once asked them how they managed to stay in love, seeing that they were old and stuff. Dad told me that once you fall in love with someone, it is always very difficult to fall out of love. I told him that I didn't understand it then, and he said I would in the future. My parents treated my brother and me like we were all they had in the world. My mom would often say that we were her future and the reason why she woke up each day and went to work. Why did she keep working even when she felt like giving up? Dad also shared this perspective with Mom. He told us that if it wasn't for us, he would quit working and then live off his pension. We were pretty comfortable in my family, to say the least. I could get whatever I wanted and whenever my brother and I went to the best high school. Our universities were different though, but then it was nothing short of standard. My parents made sure that they provided us with the things we needed. However, this did not translate to spoiling us dirty. After university, I easily got a job working at a media house. I studied everything about computer engineering at the university and thought that working in a media house wouldn't be a bad thing. I had also gotten experience from media houses before the time. While at the university, I worked with the school's media house. I moved from just test running and troubleshooting computer-related issues to working in the sound room. I had already gotten enough skills before leaving the university, so it wasn't hard for me to get a job with my experience. I began working at this media house immediately. The pay was very good and my boss assured me that things were done orderly in the organization. However, I discovered barely 2 months later I was going to be having an issue with the boss. Mr. Cole was a well-learned person and thought that he had sufficient knowledge about everything. I didn't understand why he was nicknamed a polymath until I began to have first-hand experiences with him. The first time Cole tried to teach me my work, I overlooked it easily because I thought it was probably because he was under a lot of pressure. Ah yes, working in a media house requires you to be able to work under pressure. So that day I was checking the sound system and making sure all was set for the show that would be aired soon. Then my boss walked into the room and began telling me to check the things I had already confirmed were in good condition and running well. I laughed and told him that I'd gone over everything. What I didn't know was that my laughter would make him angry. He raised his voice at me and asked why I was laughing at him. I apologized and he kept on teaching me about my job like I was an amateur or something like that. I thought what happened then would be a one-off thing, but I was wrong. My boss took it upon himself to always dish out instructions for me to carry, especially on things I had previously done. He continued to make me feel like I didn't know what I was doing whenever I was in the sound room. When I thought I could no longer take it, I submitted my resignation letter and left without looking back. My parents didn't teach us to be comfortably idle, so the next week I was on the lookout for other jobs. This time I didn't bother using my CV because I didn't want anything in my line of career. During my job hunt, I ran into an old friend of mine. I told her my current situation, and she asked whether I would love to work at a coffee shop. It was the perfect escape I needed, so I told her I was interested. Thus began my journey in the coffee shop. How I met Andy was quite interesting. Before then, I had noticed that he was a frequent customer, and he had specific times he came around. He either came in the morning at 9 or in the evening at 7. I became so used to seeing him around that on days when he was absent, I worried that something had gone wrong. Then one day I noticed that he had forgotten his wallet. I asked the owner of the coffee shop whether she had his contact information, but she said no. I decided to check my wallet, and I found his business card. I immediately put a call through and told him he had forgotten his wallet at his favorite coffee place. He rushed down and thanked me immensely. He told me that he kept important information he would need later in the day and couldn't have imagined losing it. I did see him the next day and the day after that. He asked whether he had permission to text me, and I said yes. After that, something was born in us. We moved rapidly from the talking stage to the dating stage. We both got to know things about each other. Andy was an introvert, and he confessed that the reason he frequented the shop was to see my face. He had liked me from the first time he saw me, but didn't know how to articulate his feelings to me. I laughed at him for being so coy. We eventually decided to get into a relationship when we were sure that we both were compatible. Andy asked me to be his girlfriend on his birthday, and I think that had to be the most romantic I had ever experienced. We got married the next year, after we both introduced the other to our family. The first time Andy came over to my parents to join us for dinner, my dad had developed a sort of liking and bond with him. Every time I came over, he would ask why I hadn't brought Andy with me, like he didn't have his life to live. Andy introduced me to his parents, and I thought they were pretty cool. Andy spoke to his parents just like they were siblings. He told me that it was the way his parents groomed him, and he liked it. This was because he could talk to them about anything the same way he could talk to his siblings about anything. Unlike us, he had 3 siblings, and they were all females. When they saw me, they all came to hug me and would not stop smiling sheepishly. Fast forward to after Andy and I got married. We didn't start having babies early, but none of us was bothered. At the time we got married, I was 35, while Andy was 37. Even though we went for various tests, the doctors kept assuring us that nothing was wrong with either of us and that delayed pregnancy was a natural thing. Nevertheless, our marriage continued to flourish. Of course, it was not also rosy all of the time, because there were times when we had disagreements and quarrels. But one thing I liked was that it never extended to the next day. We would find a way to settle things. I had given up on getting pregnant. By the time I got to my 40s, my husband had also given up and was suggesting other options. He was brought up either having a surrogate mother or adopting a child. Perhaps because we both got busy at work, none of us considered the options. We continued to carry on with things as they were. Well, this was some 4 years later, when I was 44. It was a Sunday, and I had decided not to go anywhere, but instead catch up with movies I had missed. I wasn't thinking about anything, but it struck me that I had missed my cycle for about 2 months now because I didn't want to raise my husband's expectations. I got my keys and drove to the hospital. There the doctor confirmed that I was pregnant. I drove back home immediately with so much delight and informed my husband of the news. He seemed pretty delighted and asked how I would love to celebrate our win. That night was different for both of us. I rested more peacefully and we had a fun time together. I informed my parents the next day, and they were also very happy for us. Then fast forward to when I was 4 months pregnant. Something very strange happened, and it felt like I'd been in a dream until I realized it was real. And he came one day and told me that he was done with the marriage and was leaving me. I laughed at the expensive joke he had made, but he told me it wasn't a joke and left, slamming the door. I cannot describe the hurt and confusion I felt at that moment. I mean, he didn't give me any reason or something close to that. He only said what he had to say and expected me to deal with it however I could. I thought we were soulmates, especially because we had been married for about 10 years and nothing of that sort had ever happened. I didn't see it coming. I contacted him immediately and tried to make him talk to me about what exactly was going on, but he kept saying that his mind was made up and there was nothing I could do, so I had better stop trying. He hung the call painfully without saying anything more. He moved out of the house within a week. The next week, he sent his lawyer to me for me to move out of the apartment. About a couple of weeks later, I found out, as I had suspected, that he had met someone and she was the reason why he was divorcing me and buying me out of his apartment. I didn't hear from Andy after I left the apartment. Things were pretty tough for me, and I ended up having a miscarriage some 2 months later. The doctor said it was due to a lot of stress. I couldn't explain what had been stressing me for the past 2 months. Somehow he found out that I had lost the pregnancy, and he sent a text saying he wanted to see me. Of course, he didn't apologize for walking out of my life at a crucial point. I didn't reply to his text because I wanted nothing to do with him. He tried to reach out a few times more, but I never answered any of them. He got tired and eventually stopped. When I met my current husband, he stopped trying to contact me, and I didn't hear from him anymore. I settled down with my current husband and was happily married with 2 kids, one 5 and the other 3. Then about 6 months ago I heard that he was terminally ill. I felt sad for him because although he had offended me, he didn't deserve to go just like that. I didn't think I was in the right frame of mind to see him, and I didn't. I eventually ended up seeing him, but that was after he had passed away. His parents had reached out to me while I was out of the country that it was his last wish to see me. I initially was reluctant, but I thought obeying his last wish wouldn't be harmful. I booked a flight and by the time it landed, I was informed that he had passed away. I didn't cry, but it hurt me so much. After that week of his death, his lawyer reached me and informed me that I was getting the majority of his estate. He gave me the breakdown and told me his parents get a generous amount for their retirement and his nephew gets money for college. Other than that, I was to get everything else, including the apartment he had once taken from me. Then there was a letter where he said that he never stopped loving or thinking of me and how I remained his wife in his mind. He also mentioned that he never got over the loss of the pregnancy and felt responsible for it. He seemed remorseful in the letter and followed my life closely. He knew who my husband was, my children, their names, my current job and all. I appreciated the letter and wished I had seen it earlier so we would have maybe settled things between us. Because the will was written, I didn't think that there would be any trouble with it. After the burial I reached out to the lawyer and that was when he made me know that there seemed to be a controversy surrounding the will. My ex-in-laws were asking me to share the inheritance with one Megan, who they called his girlfriend. I asked about her and they informed me that since she met him she stopped working completely. Instead she had chosen to depend fully on his income. She also dropped out of college and has nothing to her name. The girlfriend turned to contest the will and insisted that I had manipulated him before he died to give me everything so she would become homeless. I didn't know what to think of her suspicion, but I decided not to take her seriously. I could not possibly take seriously a 33-year-old woman who feels entitled to money she didn't work for. Maybe it was why my ex deliberately excluded her from his will. Also, I didn't feel the obligation to provide for her regardless of what my ex-in-laws had told me. I told them all of these and while my in-laws kept pleading with me to give her some share of the inheritance, the supposed girlfriend kept on running her mouth and promising that she would take me to court if I didn't agree and comply with her terms. At that point I became tired of her empty threats. For someone who didn't have anything to her name, I wondered how she would be able to afford a good lawyer that could be better than mine. Annoyingly, I told her to go search for her best lawyer and I walked out of there after saying see you in court. As expected, after that day I didn't hear anything from this person. She became quiet and ghosted for my life. When I went over to my ex-in-laws, I told them about how this person had threatened to take me to court. I mentioned that I had a very good lawyer and told her to bring it on. However, since then I have not heard a word concerning her. My ex-in-laws told me that they also had not seen her in a long time. She only packed her things from their place. She had been staying there since my ex died and left the house in the middle of the night. Oh well, I could only say good riddance to bad rubbish.